Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another fresh out of the oven edition of Syracuse Sports, presented by Krause Health, the official healthcare provider of Syracuse Athletics. My name is Brent Axe. I'm your host, and we are talking about the Big Four today. What is the Big Four? Well, in this case, it's Syracuse University football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and men's lacrosse, and how 2024 could turn out to be a big year of revival for those four programs. I wrote a column about this on syracuse.com, so I hope you can read that, and this podcast will kind of serve as a complement to that column. But I felt like there were some points that deserve further discussion. Let's face it, this is a good, meaty, juicy podcast discussion built for a format like this, so I thought we'd get into it a little more in depth. And we got some feedback from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, and I can't wait to show you some of their predictions coming up today. We hope you can become a Syracuse Sports Insider by texting the word orange to 315-847-3895. You can try it free for 2 weeks. It's just $3.99 a month after that, and being an insider means you get direct access to me. You get breaking news first. You get my opinions first. You get a back and forth during games. Love getting your feedback and seeing the rise and fall of emotions during Syracuse University sporting events. It's been great. Make 2024 the year you become a Syracuse Sports Insider. So one thing that I asked you guys was, what is the sports prediction for Syracuse sports that you are most confident about in 2024? So hang on to that thought, and we will show you some of the best responses to that from our Syracuse Sports Insiders coming up a little bit later on in the show. But before we get into the Big Four and who is in this conversation, I feel like I have to put sort of a disclaimer at the beginning here and tell you who is not, okay? This would actually be a fun podcast on its own, and I think I'm going to do this at some point, and that would be kind of power ranking the programs at Syracuse, right? Traditionally, the big ones we talk about are football, men's basketball, women's basketball, men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse. But you've got a soccer program that's won a national championship in recent years, and maybe a couple other programs at SU that are nudging their way into the conversation, right? So we could save that for another day and kind of power rank them and kind of where they stand. But two programs you're not going to hear about in this discussion, other than here at the beginning, are women's lacrosse and men's soccer. Why? Because they don't belong in this conversation for very good reasons. Those programs are fine. The men's soccer team won a national championship in 2022. Ian McIntyre has built a juggernaut that is sending players to the MLS, is winning ACC titles, getting to tournaments. They're fine. There's no need for a revival there because they're cruising down the highway. Same thing with women's lacrosse. Final Four in 2023. Consistency, winning some of the best players in the country. The only thing they have left to do is win a national championship. I wrote a column about this and discussed it around the time last year when Syracuse lost in the Final Four. And I said, that's got to be considered a disappointing year because they didn't win the national championship. And boy, did I get yelled at for that. But that's the standard they have set. They've done everything else. They've gone to the Final Four. They've won the ACC. They're number one team in the country for most of last year. Top 5 team in the preseason poll to start this year. That program's good. There's no need for a revival. Their expectations are high, as they should be. So when we talk about the Big Four, the Big Five, the Big Six, whatever it should be, that's why you're not going to hear those two programs in this particular discussion, just so you know. Wanted to get that in there off the top. But why could 2024 be a year of revival? Well, guys, it wasn't too long ago. Go to the end of the 2021-2022 academic year, athletic year. You had a football team that was 5-7. You had a men's basketball team under the final years with Jim Boeheim that was perennially on the bubble, that saw its first losing season in the Hall of Fame career of Jim Boeheim, and a program that just was not meeting the standards that it had set for itself, has not been ranked to this day since December of 2018, has not finished higher than 6th in the ACC, other than the first year it joined the league, right? You had a men's lacrosse program that had fallen to depths it had not seen before, a 4-10 record under first-year head coach Gary Gate at the time, the shadow of the Chase Scanlon scandal hanging over it, right? Coaching change before that, going from John Desko to Gary Gate. And the women's basketball program had the Quentin Hillsman scandal, had a losing record at 11-18 under an interim coach. And I think we all kind of knew at the time, and of course it came to fruition, that Felisha Legette-Jack was going to step in and take over that program, and she did. But in that moment, what you had was the worst stretch for those sports since 1982. Chris Carlson wrote a great piece about this on syracuse.com that I would encourage you to look up and read. Came out a couple of years ago, but that was the worst collective stretch for those sports since the early 1980s. And you got to remember what happened after 1982. Of course, Syracuse men's basketball exploded with the Big East. Pearl Washington arrives, right? The crowds start flowing into the Dome, and we see just the golden times of Big East basketball. Football, of course, beats Nebraska in 1984, the number one team in the country. 1987, undefeated. Coach Mack surges to new heights. Paul Pasqualoni takes that baton. And from 1990 to 2004, Syracuse football making bowl games, Donovan McNabb, Dwight Freeney, the whole thing, Big East championships. But before that, in the early days of Coach Mack, off of the Frank Maloney years, football was kind of in a dark place. Men's lacrosse started a run in 1983 that is unprecedented in the history of college lacrosse. In the final, I mean, you could just book it every year that program was going to the Final Four, right? That started after the downtimes in 82. I'm not saying that we're bound for another one of those surges here in 2024. The landscape of college athletics is dramatically different. But I think what we're poised to see is a revival that has been building here. And look, I have been as critical of Syracuse AD John Wildhack in spots where it has been necessary. But you have to be fair, and you have to compliment and look at that Wildhack may have set up these Big Four programs, the marquee programs at Syracuse University, for a revival, right? Let's start with football. Now, Emily Leiker and I did a separate podcast about this amazing offseason that Fran Brown has had as the new head football coach at Syracuse. I'm taping this on January 4th. A month ago today, he was formally announced as the new head football coach. Think of all the transfers, the recruiting revival, the coaching hires that he has done in a month's time. It's incredible what he has done. So we covered it there. But the point I wanted to make on football here is how much he's playing with house money. Now, a new coach is certainly going to be afforded a honeymoon period, right? A time to set himself up, as we mentioned, get his coaches in place, get his philosophy in place. You kind of give him a couple of years to do that. But in a month's time, he's already delivered results with the recruits, with the transfers, with the coaching staff that he's brought in, Elijah Robinson and Nick Williams in particular, who are two of the top 20 rated recruiters in the country. It's one thing to spread a message and tell us what you're going to do, right? Dino Babers and the Close Your Eyes speech and other coaches that have said, this is what we're going to do to build Syracuse football. And Fran Brown still has a lot of that to go, but he's already delivered. Remember, the Dome next year is going to have reduced capacity for football because they're putting new seats in. So it's going to go from about 49,550 to around 43,000 and change in terms of capacity for football. The timing for that versus the demand for tickets is actually kind of ironically good for Syracuse because it's supply and demand. There's less supply, there's more demand. There's not going to be a lot of empty seats at the Dome next year. So Emily and I covered the basics of what has happened in the offseason in a separate podcast. But by and large, with what we talked about there and what is considered to be a pretty manageable schedule for Syracuse in 2024, the tide could certainly be turning. Now, you can say to yourself, well, Brent, this program made a bowl game the last 2 years. True, but it also made a coaching change. Wildhack noted that Babers' record in November in particular, the second half collapses. 2022, they start 6-0. They're back in the rankings. Everybody's doing the dance of joy, and they lose 5 of their last 6 and lose a bowl game to end it. This year, they had to scrap, claw, and MacGyver their way just to get bowl eligible in that last game of the year. And then, of course, they got trucked in that bowl game by South Florida. So as we're saying, yeah, bowl game could be the standard, but maybe not what it should be at Syracuse football. And Wild Hack recognized that and made the change. So there is enthusiasm and just an interest in Syracuse football at this time of the year that I have not seen ever in my time living here in Syracuse, New York, and I've lived here my whole life and covering this football team as a professional for about 25 years now, okay? So that's football. Let's look at men's basketball. Men's basketball has lost 4 games this year. 3 of those 4 teams are currently ranked in the AP Top 25. Syracuse lost to Gonzaga. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to Duke, right? Their other loss was to Virginia, who's obviously a noted ACC program. The common denominator in those 4 losses, turnovers. Syracuse has averaged 14 turnovers in those 4 losses. Syracuse has been just a fun team to watch this year. They're pushing the pace. Their pace has gone to about 40th in the country when it was 170th in the country a year ago. People have really embraced how Autry uses his bench, unlike his predecessor, Quadir Copeland, winning the ACC Player of the Week, engaging fans, right? Judah Mintz and how he's playing. And we could go through all the names of what we're seeing here. The feeling about Syracuse basketball, kind of what we're talking about with football, is, okay, Autry's got to do his thing. But here's the thing, guys. 3 years without the NCAA tournament. 3 straight years. The last time that happened around here was the mid-1960s. That's not the standard. So while you have to be fair and give Autry some space to do his own thing, you've got to look at this one of 2 ways. Of the 17 remaining games on Syracuse's schedule, all ACC games, 8 of them are quad 1 games. We've covered so far how Syracuse has not done well when they have to punch up. In fact, they have not won a quad 1 game since February of 2021. But there is opportunity there, at the very least, for Syracuse to go down the stretch, handle their business in some of these games, and be on the Joe Lunardi bracketology radar at the end of the season, which may be good enough. They wouldn't have clinched an NCAA tournament bid if that ends up being the case, but if they're in the conversation for it, and they can punch up and pull some upsets, then I think the feeling would be, okay, I'm in. I'm in on this. So basketball could be on its way back. It could go the other way, too. Young team, tough schedule, not ready for prime time. But by and large, people are like, okay, new era, I'm in. Got to let Autry do his thing, set that orange standard. Women's basketball. Felisha Legette-Jack comes in and takes over a program that I mentioned had a major scandal just a couple of years ago in the resignation of Coach Quentin Hillsman. And there were some pretty serious allegations in there. Remember the investigation by The Athletic and what he was looking into in terms of bullying players and some pretty serious accusations from people that were involved with the program. He resigns, right? Vaughn Reed comes in, interim year, goes 11-18, and this whole time, we're thinking, who can come in and revive Syracuse basketball? There was one answer to that question, and her name is Felisha Legette-Jack. She came in. She not only cleaned up the program, for all we know, right, from everything on the surface, they're winning. For the first time in the Jack era, they are in the top 25 this week, having beaten Notre Dame. The aura around the program, I mean, the boundless enthusiasm in which Coach Jack leads this program. You see the videos, you see her at press conferences, you hear her in interviews, right? We fight on social media. She went through a health scare earlier this year, right? And thankfully is back on the court after that health scare. Well, this is a team that's pretty darn good. Deja Fair, one of the best players in the ACC. I would put Georgia Woolley right up there as well. Alyssa Latham, what a freshman sensation she has been. Elena Rice, the leadership that she brings to the table. Now, they have to go through the ACC, right? But this is a team that I think it would be fair to say it'd be disappointing if they don't make the tournament based on their hot start. As we speak, this team only has 1 loss. They're playing North Carolina on Thursday night, so we'll see how that game turns out. We're taping this podcast before that game, but I think that is this kind of what I was saying about women's lacrosse. That's the standard that they've set. They were on the doorstep of the tournament last year. The natural step is to take that step forward. But getting back in the rankings, now they had actually been in the rankings a couple of years ago. We mentioned the men's team has not been in the rankings since, 2018? So the women's program had been to the Final Four in 2016. Had been in the rankings under Coach Q, right? Everything that went down with his resignation had to do with things away from the court. The success on the court, frankly, spoke for itself, right? But they're back in the top 25, and if they get in the tournament, right there, much like we were saying with Fran Brown, you're playing with house money. There's no better way to show the progress you're making. Fans are back in. They love Coach Jack, and there's a lot of incremental things around the program that are showing improvement, right? You get in the tournament, boom. You have set the compass in the right direction. Now let's look at men's lacrosse. Lacrosse is a fascinating story to me because this is a program that from 1980 to 2013 went to 26 Final Fours. They have not been back to the Final Four since 2013. We saw a number of losses in the tournament. We have seen a sport, to its credit, you got to remember back in the day, and whatever you want to nominate that as back in my day, right? But college lacrosse was a limited sport. You had a short list of programs that dominated. Syracuse, Johns Hopkins, Maryland, right? The list goes on, a couple other schools we could put on there, but you kind of heard some of the same names, Virginia and Princeton, just kind of rotating in the Final Four. But then lacrosse became the fastest growing high school sport in the country and remains one of the fastest growing high school sports in the country. And all of a sudden, you know, a lot more Division I programs playing the sport and talent that was going to about 5 or 6 schools at one point that's now going to 20, right? That affected Syracuse as much as anybody. The Chase Scanlon scandal happens a couple of years ago, and the dark cloud that put around Syracuse lacrosse. That guy wore the 22, the most famed number in the history of the sport, right? So there was just a number of changes that had to be made, not only as a result of that, but, you know, John Desko, for everything he did and was an incredible coach for Syracuse lacrosse, it was just time to turn the page, and Gary Gait comes in. Well, Gary Gait had some growing pains as he went 4-10 2 years ago in making that transition from Desko's players to his, from Desko's style to his. 4-10, the worst record in then I believe it was the 107-year history of Syracuse lacrosse. And then last year they went 8-7, and we saw some real signs of life from this team, notably Joey Spallina. You know, Joey Spallina, I'd be stunned if he doesn't win 2 Tour-a-thon trophies before he leaves here. He's one of the best players in the history of Syracuse lacrosse already. Yep, I said it, and will be by the time he leaves. One of the most electric talents in the sport overall, and somebody that's really going to carry the baton of lacrosse forward through these generations. Just an absolutely electric talent. But when you look at what lacrosse is bringing back overall, beyond Spallina, okay, you got 5 of your top 7 scorers coming back from last year's team, which is important in the ACC, the most competitive league in college lacrosse. You bring back your entire defense. There's still questions about that defense that have to be answered. But when you're bringing back Will Mark, who was, I'm going to punt it up here, on the mark as goaltender last year for Syracuse lacrosse, All-American, 207 saves, 54% save percentage. You have one of the top takeaway defenders in the country and Sam Alexo back. At least you have experience, right? 5 of your top 7 scorers, Spallina and Owen Hiltz, notably. But Gary Gait was the most aggressive coach in Division I in the portal. He brings in Christian Moulet from Lehigh, an attackman. Princeton All-American senior midfielders Jake Stevens and Sammy English. Jake Titus from Union. You had Matt Wright come in as a long stick midfielder. Mason Kuhn from Tufts to strengthen a face-off unit that was 64th in the country a season ago. Joey's younger brother is a Fogo for Syracuse football, a face-off guy, and could make an impact there. 8-7 a year ago, on the doorstep of the tournament, couldn't quite get in. This is a loaded Syracuse lacrosse roster, and I think what you're going to see this year, more importantly, what you're going to feel this year, is that Syracuse lacrosse is back. The feeling of Pick your era, the Gate brothers, the Powell brothers, whatever your favorite era of Syracuse lacrosse is. You can't go back to that because, as I mentioned, the sport has changed. But whatever the 2024 version of that is, I think you're going to see that. We've got some predictions coming from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. The prediction I feel strongest the most about, not only will this team make the tournament, they're back in the Final Four in 2024. And how about that? More to come as we get closer to lacrosse season, and we will discuss that. But I'm gonna call my shot on that one, guys. They're back in the Final Four in 2024. It's like an expression I just made up off the top of my head. That was pretty good. So really, that's my long-winded way of saying football is a little different, although some people believe they can compete for the college football playoff next year. Remember, it expands to 12 teams. But if men's basketball, women's basketball, and men's lacrosse get back in the NCAA tournament, and we mentioned how football is kind of playing with house money right now, that revival will have taken place. I asked our Syracuse Sports Insiders to give me the prediction for SU Sports they feel strongest about in 2024. Guys, you are certainly going to notice the theme in these predictions. I hope we're not prisoners of the moment right now, but that is a credit to what Fran Brown is doing. Every day there's a new transfer that comes in or some sort of news that just gets Syracuse fans jacked up. Our Syracuse Sports Insiders cannot ask enough questions about football and are so into football right now. And as you can imagine, our predictions take on a certain theme here. So let's get to it. Bill F., most confident about a renewal in Syracuse football. I don't see how we can miss a bowl game next year with the schedule that we have and the new recruits that we have coming in. Love how he's saying we there. My guy Timmy C., SU football will be in the ACC championship game. Go Orange. JR says the most confident prediction has to be Syracuse football making a bowl game. Before the Duke game, I would have said basketball makes the tournament. Not so sure after that loss. Kevin B., prediction. The Dome will have larger crowds for football than we've seen in years, and with easier schedule, Syracuse will be ranked in the top 20 at year's end. Now, remember, the capacity will be reduced in the Dome going forward with the new seats that'll be there, but certainly get what Kevin is saying with, I don't think there's going to be a lot of seats available for football games this year, guys. Roger B., the football team will be better. The basketball team will remain mediocre and not make the NCAA tournament. Roger, not happy with the hoops team right now. Matthew Z. says Syracuse football will play for an ACC championship with a top 25 recruiting class when Fran gets his first full recruiting class next year. Certainly did some damage in the 3 weeks he had for this recruiting class. Remember, there's another signing day coming in February, but has already made an impact there. Let's go to Stan. SU football will win at least 8 games in 2024. My guy Gonzo, for one football game next year, we will fill the Dome. Gonzo, I think it's going to be more than one next year, given the fever pitch surrounding Syracuse football. And let's have a little bit of truth serum and honesty here, guys. I've lived in Syracuse my whole life. I will be a general in the Army defending Syracuse, New York, until the day I die. This could be a little bit of a fair weather sports town. Okay? Let's be honest here. But you got to get those fans back. I call them the fair weather 10,000, right? You got to get them back. And how do you get them back? There's got to be a collective buzz about this thing. You want to feel part of what's going on up there. And I think we're almost at mission accomplished on that with the buzz surrounding football. This actually came from YouTube, and I like this from our football podcast from at the YMCA 2020. Cuse is back. McCord is going to lead them to 10-plus wins. That's, of course, new quarterback Kyle McCord. I just hope he steps up as a leader on and off the field, as that is what the quarterback position requires. From Stevie Mack, the number of SU football season ticket purchases will increase substantially. I told you guys there was a theme here, right? From Paul L., my number one prediction is that the SU football spring game will be the best attended in years. My second prediction is that the men's basketball team will make the NCAA tournament. Goes on to say this. Not so confident about men's lacrosse because the defense is still a big question mark. Concerning the women, the basketball team should make the NCAA tournament as long as Deja Fair remains healthy. And we'll round it out here with Don P. SU football, 9-3, and a win in a good bowl game. Great stuff from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. We would love for you to become one today. Just text the word orange to 315-847-3895. There's other ways to sign up, guys. You've maybe seen the embed in some of our stories on syracuse.com. That's the easiest way to do it, though. If you just text the word orange to 315-847-3895, you'll get a link back. It'll walk you through the process. It's so easy to sign up. Remember, it's free for 2 weeks. Try it out. Just $3.99 a month after that. You can cancel anytime. It's okay. You won't offend me. You're always welcome to come back, but so easy to try, and we just love having that interaction with our Syracuse Sports Insiders. And it pays to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. You get breaking news first from me. We try to give you some breaking news from other people there first, but certainly anything that I have, you're going to get first. My opinions first. The feedback on this podcast that you guys get, the priority you get on this podcast, shot the text to you this morning before I recorded the pod. Give me some predictions. There they were, right? Your voice heard on this podcast, setting the tone for topics and your participation. It's been great. Back and forth during games, questions, comments, whatever you get, shoot it at me. Anytime. 315-847-3895. Just text the word orange to that number, and you'll be all set to sign up to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. That's going to do it for this episode of Syracuse Sports, presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for SU Athletics. Remember, Syracuse basketball off until January 10th when they take on Boston College, so a rare weekend off. We don't have a post-game show coming until then, but hang in there. Subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and you'll see new episodes of Syracuse Sports pop up whenever we have a new one for you there. And always great, as mentioned, to hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. We'll talk to you next time, guys. Thanks for hanging today.